Surprise, January. So Scream tells the story of Ghostface rising once again in Woodsboro after 25 years have passed from the original murders. What's up, everybody? We finally have the release of Scream 5, otherwise titled Scream. This is a movie that I've definitely been curious about, been looking forward to, but I've kept my expectations pretty modest. For those of you that haven't watched my reviews of the previous 4 films, which I would encourage you to do, they're a couple years old, but my thoughts are very current on those movies, that I've always been a casual fan of Scream. For as much as I love the slasher genre, I've never been amongst the vast majority of you that have loved this franchise and hailed it as one of the best since 1996. It took me a long time to really start to appreciate and gain some love for those original movies, and it stands as a franchise that, while never being one of my favorites, I think is a very good and probably the most consistent as far as quality in the slasher subgenre. So walking into this new one, I really only wanted to see a good Scream movie. I didn't have gigantic expectations. This wasn't something that was feeding this 10-year urge, this 10-year hunger that I've had for another Scream film. I had concerns about whether or not it was going to match the quality of the other films, since this is the first one that Wes Craven is not directing, and this is the second film, the other one being Scream 3, what I would call the worst in the franchise, while still being pretty solid. It's the second movie to not have Kevin Williamson writing the film, so a lot of red flags, but I was cautiously optimistic and walked into this just wanting this to at least match the quality of the other sequels, not necessarily needing this to be the best slasher film of all time, or the best Scream movie of all time, or even be the best Scream movie since the original. As long as I'm entertained and have a good time with a very fun slasher flick, I will be happy. And with that being said, I walked out happy. Now, before I start getting into my positives, I want to let you guys know I will be talking some spoilers later on in this video. Once I give my rating for the film and look like I'm about to wrap up my review, I'm going to pause for a few minutes and talk about a few spoiler details. I planned on doing a full spoiler review, but I don't feel like there was enough spoiler details to really discuss in a full standalone video, so completely spoiler free until I give you the warning. So starting off with the positives for Scream, I was pleasantly surprised at the way that they kept on the tradition of this very self-aware meta storytelling within this 5th film. There was a lot of tabloids and a lot of articles going around about this time last year, after this movie was announced and dated, that the filmmakers were talking about not really leaning into that meta side. It was going to be more of a straightforward slasher. I don't know if that was just them changing their minds after seeing the fan reaction, or maybe they said that and misspoke. I don't know. It's literally out there though, and I've worried about that since I've read that. I'm like, look, if you're not going to do meta dialogue, if you're not going to be self-referential of the slasher genre, are you even Scream at that point? And to alleviate everybody's worries along with mine, they still lean into all of that. They take a lot of commentary on toxic fandom and fan response, and something that is very relevant today, and talking about requels like the Halloween 2018 approach, which I said back when they announced this movie that that's probably going to be the best thing to talk about as far as a trend in horror today that you can make fun of. So I had a lot of fun with that side of things. I think that it matches the level of cleverness and the level of self-referential joy that horror and slasher fans will get out of this movie of the previous 4 films. So that was the thing I walked in the most worried about, and that was one of the things that I enjoyed the most about this film. There's also a lot of really nice nods and winks to the original film, with this kind of taking on a meta approach to a requel or a reboot sequel, where everything has to go back to the original and we got to bring back legacy characters and we have to reference things that everybody holds true, which is the first film, while trying to advance to a new generation. They do that within this film while telling you that they're going to do that within this film. So there's a lot of callbacks to certain settings of the first film. There's kind of new modern recreations of certain sequences. There's a lot of character ties to people from the first film that I thought was a nice touch. So if you're somebody who I would go on a limb and say is most Scream fans that love the original the most, I think there's going to be a lot of really cool things in this movie that is going to warm your heart as a fan of the original. They do a pretty good job at building tension and setting up scares in this movie. I don't think that it was as good as some people are making it out to be in some of the early reactions, like they were these huge, awesome jump scares, but they do play around with your expectations a lot. There's plenty of scenes where it looks like they're setting up a jump scare just to fake you out, just to hit you later on. And that's something that I appreciate when I'm somebody like me that really dislikes cheap jump scares and false jump scares. I like when a movie can play with your expectations of what a slasher movie has to be nowadays and kind of surprise you once in a while with some of the reveals and with some of the entrances of the killer, of the evil. Of all of the returning legacy characters, shockingly for me, I really liked David Arquette in this. If you have not seen my previous reviews, I'm not a gigantic fan of the character of Dewey or even David Arquette as an actor. He's fine, but he's not somebody either as an actor or the character of Dewey that I've ever really loved. And there's some movies in Scream where I actually think he's one of the weakest elements. This movie, of the three people that are coming back, he's the one that really feels like he wanted to give it his all. Like he wanted to really do something new with the character, like he wanted to bring a new shade to his performance of that character. And by a landslide, he's the one of the three that I was the most invested in and the most interested in and enjoyed seeing him on screen the most. So that was a big surprise for me. And my final positive is that I think that the filmmakers did a really great job at maintaining a level of consistency, not only with the quality, but with the look and the feel and the energy of the previous four films. I know that I am amongst the majority that was really worried about how this movie was going to turn out without Wes Craven, and I think that they did a very commendable and a very respectable job at carrying on his franchise and doing it in a way that certainly feels like there's elements of newness there, but it's very much in line with what he did before. They're not trying to outstage him, they're not trying to overshadow him, and they're certainly not trying to disrespect anything that has been set up in this franchise thus far. This is a very solid addition to the Scream franchise. Moving on to the mixed, I think that they do something smart here and certainly something commendable, where they really do hold back a lot on the legacy characters. This trailer might make you believe that Sidney Prescott is the star of this movie and it's going to be like a typical Scream setup where they're brought back to the town and it's focusing on them while everybody new is just kind of like supporting side characters. And this movie kind of flips that. The new cast of characters are definitely the focus and the legacy characters are there to be exactly that, legacy characters. And while I think that that's the right approach, and while I'm certainly somebody who has said, okay, enough with these three, like I love them, especially Sidney, but they've survived enough, they've been the focus enough, it's time for something new. I don't think that the new cast of characters were fun, interesting, or engaging enough to enjoy that balance entirely. I think that the legacy characters are absolutely going to be the ones that pretty much all Scream fans lock onto in this movie as far as their engagement, as far as their enjoyment. And while there are some good characters, there's nobody here that's bad in the new cast. There's just nobody that stands out all that much. So even the ones that are acting really well, there was no new character that I was really invested in or that I really enjoyed on the level of, say, Hayden Panettiere's character in Scream 4, where I'm like, she needs to come back for a sequel. She's awesome. There's nobody like that in this movie for me. I also was a bit mixed on the humor in this movie. There's definitely some good laughs, and there's a decent amount of humor throughout, but it didn't feel like the writing was as sharp or as memorable as it has been in the previous films. There was no standout moment, no standout character, no standout line of dialogue that we can all point to one or two or five of those from all of the four previous films. So while the writing is good, and while the energy is certainly consistent with the tone and the energy of this franchise, there was just not really as much fun to be had in this movie as I think the other four films have provided. Now moving on to the negatives. Now this is something that's always tricky to bring up because this is different for every individual, and it's maybe not even necessarily the movie's fault. Maybe I'm just a little bit too cognizant of screenwriting and things that clearly I see that they're setting up. But I figured out who the killer was within 15 minutes. And this is the only Scream movie that I can say that for. I've been surprised or blindsided by all four of the previous sequels. And this movie, I just immediately, as soon as a character said something, I was like, they're the killer. They've got to be the killer. And all throughout the movie, things kept happening to where I'm like, okay, they're definitely the killer. There's no way in hell they're not the killer. And then by the end, I started to doubt myself. I'm like, you know what? Maybe they've been tricking me the whole movie. That would be pretty, oh, no, yep, they're the killer. And so that's tricky to bring up. I don't know if that's something to where I just recognize some of the themes and some of the trickery that they're going on with the meta storytelling, and I can kind of see where that would be a reveal that would make sense for what they're talking about, and so I was just 90 steps ahead of the movie. Or if that's genuinely something that they just telegraphed way too early, we'll find out. But this is the only Scream movie where I've figured out the killer. There's also quite a few times in this movie where they want you to suspend your disbelief in favor of having a cool sequence, and it just does that a little bit too much. For example, there's a sequence in the hospital where Ghostface is going after somebody who is in the hospital, and there's literally one cop in this entire hospital, apparently. Like, there's an entire floor that's empty. No nurses, no doctors, no other patients, nothing. And it's like, dude, I don't go to the hospital very often, but I have never once in my life been to any floor in a hospital that has had less than like 50 people. Yes, it's a slasher movie. Yes, it's a movie in general. You have to suspend your disbelief for certain things, but there's just one too many things in this movie like that. That's just a bit much. It's a bit too much of a stretch. I also think that there's moments where maybe they lean a little bit too hard into the meta style storytelling, a little bit too hard into the message that they're trying to be creative with. I enjoy what they're saying. I enjoy the fact that they went there. That, like I said, that was one of my biggest positives of the movie. But there are times where it feels like the subtlety is missed here. The third act of this film has like the subtlety of a rocket launcher, and that's certainly fun. It's enjoyable. It's fun whenever these movies go batshit insane by the third act, but I definitely miss some of that more subtle creativity that we got when Kevin Williamson was writing these scripts. And finally, the biggest disappointment for me, and a lot of this is on the hands of you early reviewers that just can't help but overhype the fuck out of every single movie that you guys get a chance to see before everybody else. Shame on you. There's better, more respectable ways to get your Twitter quote on the poster. But with that rant being over, the kills in this movie are nothing to write home about. And I don't understand what movie everybody else saw. Every single reaction and early review that I have seen, even the people that saw it last night with me on opening night, all I see is bloody as hell, vicious as hell, creative, and it's like, this is the same style kills that we have been seeing for now 5 films. Ghostface stabs people. He's almost exclusively stabbed people since the first film. There's no creativity in the kills of Scream. For as creative and as innovative as they try to get and usually succeed with the storytelling and the script writing, they give no fucks about trying to be inventive or creative with the kills. It's just stabby, stabby, stabby. And that was something that I was really hoping this movie was going to break the mold on, because stabs are great in a slasher. I get it, it's classic, it's simple. But as somebody that has grown up watching Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and Child's Play, I like a little variety in my carnage, and this movie just carries on the tradition of stabby, stabby, stabby. Is it one of the more bloody stabby stabbies than the previous Scream movies? Sure, but not by this ungodly margin, not to a point where I've seen all these early reactions hyping it like it's just the most carnage-filled Scream. Go in with modest expectations. I'm telling you right now, this is very, very consistent with the kills that we have gotten in the previous 4 movies. And for me, unfortunately, that's a disappointment. So overall, guys, I really enjoyed this movie. Like I said, I'm a casual Scream fan, so take that with a grain of salt. If you're somebody that lives and dies by this franchise, you might have more things that you love about this movie or more things that you don't appreciate about this movie. But for me, as a casual enjoyer of the Scream franchise, I just wanted this to be among the quality that I have seen from the previous 3 sequels, and for me, this delivered that. It's not the best since the original, in my opinion. It's not the best Scream movie. It's not even the best slasher film that I've seen in decades. It's just a good, solid Scream movie, and that's all that I wanted. So if you're a fan of Scream, I think that this movie is going to deliver most of what you would want from a Scream sequel, and especially given that Wes Craven did not direct this, I think it's impressive that it fits with the franchise as well as it does. So check this thing out in theaters, and then go out and buy it. Alright, so talking about a few spoilerific details on this movie that I wanted to discuss. I think that the killer reveals were pretty decent, but I was disappointed in the fact that I saw Jack Quaid as the killer within minutes. I mean, by his second scene. As soon as he came into this situation and didn't know anything about the Stab movies, I was like, come on, dude, like no, you're setting up some reasonable doubt there. You're setting up some alibi for why you would have nothing to do with this. And then that's immediately followed up by a scene where Dewey is quite literally talking to the audience to set up this false red herring where he's like, have you looked at him? How long have you known him? The rule number 1, never trust the love interest. And the fact that they kept talking about, we got to go back to the original, we got to be legacy for the original, I was like, well, the original, it was the boyfriend. And there was plenty of reasons why it made the audience think that it was not the boyfriend. So I knew it was Jack Quaid the entire movie. That was a little disappointing for me, but I did like his motivation. I did like the reveals by the end. I thought that it was done pretty well. I didn't really get a whole lot of standout vibes from the girl that he was with, the second killer. She kind of just felt like the superfluous character when Jack Quaid was literally the character that was holding all of the narrative as far as why he was a killer. So I enjoyed that. The motivation of being toxic fandom, and they're so obsessed with the original and hate the fact that the sequels have disrespected it, and the newest iteration, Stab 8 or whatever, has pissed off all the fans, and we got to set it right. I thought that was pretty clever. That was something that's very relevant to today, where fans can get very entitled. Fans can almost like act like they own a franchise, and it's something that, especially as somebody that does YouTube, I see constantly in my comment section. So I thought it was clever. It certainly resonated with me. I think they went a little bit too heavy-handed with it, but I did enjoy it. The disappointing side of that, however, is that the movie really does hammer home so much throughout the movie about legacies and blood ties, and all of the victims in the movie have ties to the original movie, and you have the whole reveal that the main character is the illegitimate daughter of Billy Loomis, and he's got these visions, which was a really cool touch having Skeet Ulrich back. Even though it was de-aged, it looked pretty good. But they had so much hammering home of this expectation that it's going to be tied to the original movie that I actually started to buy into the fan theory that Stu was going to return as the main killer. To the point where I was so sure that Jack Quaid was the killer that by the third act I was like, maybe he's not. Like, it just seems too obvious to me. Maybe they're going to pull the rug out from under me, and this guy, who is clearly taller than both of the killers, is going to actually end up being Matthew Lillard, and people are going to go nuts in the theater. And it was a little disappointing that that wasn't it. I still think that there was a very silly but sensical way that they could have done that, but nonetheless, I'm not going to hold the movie responsible for fan theories. So I liked the movie, I liked the killer reveals, I liked the whole tie with Billy Loomis and all of that. I just feel like I wish I could have been surprised a bit more. Like I said previous in the review, this is the only Scream movie where I saw the writing on the wall and knew who the killer was, and I knew pretty goddamn quick. Also, the death of Dewey. Now, I'll say I've been somebody who has been very adamant for years now, even before Scream 5 was announced, that if we ever get a new Scream film, they better start killing off some of these legacy characters. And so I'm glad that they did. It's only disappointing for me that the only character in this movie, the legacy character that I really cared about and really, really was invested in, that's the one that got killed. I think that David Arquette did damn good in this movie. I think even during his death scene, it was emotional because we were invested. So maybe that was a purposeful choice to make him a lot more of the emotional anchor, where the other two were literally just there, it seems. Even Sidney Prescott, a little disappointing that she was just kind of there. But yeah, I'm glad that they started at least to kill these people off. If we're going to get a new trilogy, by the end of this new trilogy, it better be just new characters, and you better replace them with characters that are a little bit more stand out than the characters we got in this movie. So what did you guys think of Scream? Did you enjoy this? Do you feel like there was something missing from the writing or from the directing, being this is a different team altogether? Is this your favorite since the original? Is this your favorite Scream movie, period? Let me know all of your thoughts down below, guys. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button. If you guys enjoy this video, I've done reviews of the previous 4 Scream films. I've ranked the films before. And in the coming week, I'm going to not only rank the films again, but I'm also going to rank all of the Ghostface killers, which will obviously be a spoiler-filled video. But if you like Scream, please hit the subscribe button so you do not miss any of that content coming your way. Thank you guys for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.